He paused and stepped through. There he saw the number that hung over their heads since they'd woken up. 9. Like the numbers on every other door, this one too was in a rough shape, and with red paint. Its door was set into the back wall of the room. Junpei leapt toward it with a sudden burst of energy. A large double door, heavy and full of solemn importance. He grabbed hold and shook. Nothing, but he hadn't expected it to open. The red sat on the wall next to the door, its screen read vacant. Finally, they'd found it. Junpei felt himself overwhelmed by a torrent of emotion. They'd found the exit, but cold gripped his heart. He knew all too well why. As he stood, frozen, unsure of what to think or feel.
Jumpy, look! Behind you!
He turned to find another 9 door. Was there a second? Why? Junpei's voice was barely audible, even to himself. He stumbled toward the second door, as if somehow compelled. A small, single door, in the starboard corner of the room, the same wall as the door they'd entered from, but in the opposite corner. There was no mistaking it. A red sat on the wall next to this door, too. Junpei shook the handle pointlessly and muttered to himself. Why? Why the hell are there 2 number 9 doors? Well, there was always 2 doors. Think about it. Zero never said there's only 1 door. He just said seek a door with a number 9 on it. Of course, we just assumed there was only 1. Why would there be more than 1? Jeez. Junpei was stunned. Zero's trick had taken him completely by surprise. There were 2 doors. All 9 of them had a chance to escape without leaving anyone behind. Now the reason for the bracelet numbers was clear. Divided in 2, the digital root for both teams could produce a 9. 1, 2, 7, 8, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Both would be a 9. Or maybe 2, 3, 4, 9, 1, 5, 6, 7, 8. There were many other combinations, but there was always a way for all of them to escape. But what did that mean? From the very beginning, the nonary game was designed to save all 9 people. Zero hadn't been lying. Zero had never said there was only 1 door. But anyone who'd found themselves in the game would have assumed there would only be 1, and fights would break out. One team would betray or deceive the other. Someone might be hurt. Someone might get killed. But eventually, they'd reach the room Junpei now found himself in, and realized how pointless all of their actions had been. There were 2 doors. There was no need for anyone to die. They'd understood, and been appalled, overwhelmed with guilt at what they'd done. Perhaps that was the point of the game. How the nonary game was meant to be played. Fortunately, they hadn't started to fight one another, at least not yet, but if one single misstep was made, if the wrong mistakes had happened, the stakes would rise and the noose would tighten. The thought of it would send a chill down his spine. So what are we gonna do? A voice broke through Junpei's frantic thoughts. Santa's. It brought Junpei back to his senses. No use worrying about the future. He needed to figure out what they were going to do next. Can they still do it if they've already lost a person? It depends. If you notice, so far at least, all 3 paths that we've taken have resulted in 1 person dying. The 9th man. So far, at least. The 9th man's death doesn't change anything. Think back to the puzzle that we solved to gain access to Pushmaster. We needed to create combinations that created a sum of 15, right? I went over then that provided there was a pair that made a 9, it was still possible to go through pretty much any door. The ninth man is the most dangerous. The ninth man's bracelet is the most dangerous, specifically because it acts as a free space. A free space only for a single person, or a single set. 9 can go through any door they want, provided that everyone else can meet the door number. But what if the door number is a 9 by default? Well, the ninth man can still go through that, they just need everyone else to yield a 9 as well. Any combination of numbers, provided that they reach a DR of 9, can help the ninth man go through. Theoretically, it is still possible to go through this if we've lost a person, and we have indeed lost a person. No matter what we do, we're going to be down to 8, technically. If any of the other 8, however, were lost, that's when complications would arise. Specifically because we would lose a combination to create a 9. It could still theoretically be doable, especially if you say salvage the bracelet. Because remember, that's something that we can do. It's just a little harder. There was only one combination of 3 people that would give a digital root of 9. We need to go back. Santa and Ace agreed. Yeah, I agree. We cannot leave June behind. Junpei let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding.
Are you sure? I don't mind staying.
June's body betrayed her true feelings. Her eyes were met with the beginnings of tears. Her legs shook. It's okay. There's no way we'd leave you behind. Santa had said what Junpei had known the moment he realized which 3 could go through the door. Besides, I'd rather drown at the bottom of the ocean than escape with this sausage fest. Maybe I'll get to go to Atlanta. Are you sure you don't mean Atlantis? Oh, right. Oops. Maybe it was the sudden reassurance that no one wanted to leave June behind. But Junpei laughed harder than he had in some time. Santa and Ace smiled.
You guys.
June blinked. Tears from her eyes bit her lip. She didn't know what else to say. Very well. Best we head back to C deck then. We should be able to take the elevator we passed earlier. Perhaps Clover, Seven, and Lotus will have returned from door 1. Even as they spoke, they knew finding the others wouldn't necessarily improve the situation. They couldn't be split into teams that could both go through the doors. Ace knew it. They all knew it. But there was nothing else they could do. Find the other 3, search for another solution. Let's go. Ace looked at all 3 of them and turned and headed through the door. Santa and June followed. Junpei started toward the door, but stopped. He'd been too busy with the other concerns to notice the room itself. It didn't seem terribly important now, but what was it? Junpei looked around, for the first time noticing things that weren't doors with 9s on them. A red carpet that ran between 2 columns of wood benches that ran the length of the room. The carpet began at the large set of double doors, ran toward the bow. To an altar, perhaps? A small, rectangular alcove at the end of the carpet. Inside the alcove, a raised platform. Resting on it, a coffin. What on earth was a coffin doing in a place like this? Junpei didn't have time to answer that question.
What the hell are you doing? Let's move!
Senta's voice echoed from the hallway outside. Right, sorry. I'll be right there. Junpei turned on his heel and left the room. They took the elevator up to the C deck. Once there, they headed back toward the main hall and the central staircase. It didn't take them long. Junpei found Seven and Lotus waiting for them. They didn't look happy. We've got a problem. Clover's gone. Junpei and his companions looked at one another. He turned back to Seven and Lotus. What do you mean, gone? Santa, Ace, and June had their own questions. When?
Why?
You two went into door 1 with Clover, didn't you? Yeah, we went through the door. But Clover barely spoke to us. She just did her own thing the whole time. There were 4 rooms on the other side of door 1. She wouldn't let us into the 4th room. She just said, I'll take care of this one, and shut the door. And shut the door. She must have blocked it with something on the other side. We waited for a while, but Clover didn't come out. We called for her, but she didn't answer. So I kicked it down. We went into the room. But it was empty. Clover wasn't there. There's a door on the other wall. And it was open. We figured she opened it and left by herself. We ran after her, but... well, obviously we didn't find her. You figured that much out. Clover's gone. Junpei thought for a moment. When did this happen? We got here just before you. You certainly have excellent timing.
So you haven't searched anywhere other than near the staircase?
No, we haven't. Ace spoke. His voice had an edge of resolve and concern. Very well then. We best separate and look for Clover. We haven't much time left. Let's begin. The other 6 players spread out. Junpei and June ran to the central hospital room and looked around. She's not here.
No, she isn't.
They searched a little longer, but with no luck. They couldn't find Clover. They eventually gave up and left the central hospital room. Slowly, they made their way back to the hallway. At last, they reached the stairs, and Junpei spoke. Maybe we should split up. I'll head back up the stairs, take the elevator down to E deck. You take the stairs to B deck.
All right. That sounds good. But,
What?
could you stop calling me by that code name when we're alone?
Sure. I'll do that, Akane. There was a reason Junpei persisted in calling her June, even when they were alone. But perhaps not the best reason. He was embarrassed to call her by the nickname he'd used when they were children. Connie. 9 years ago, it came naturally. They were children, after all. But now they were adults. It felt strange. Regardless of what he might hope for, to call a woman he wasn't dating by such a childish name felt odd to him. Of course, to call her Miss Kurashiki would be even worse. Simply Kurashiki would seem brusque. And he couldn't put his finger on why, but it felt forward to call her Akane when they hadn't seen one another for so long. In short, it was easier for him to call her June, and leave it at that.
I'm going.
Be careful, Connie. June, or Connie, blushed, smiled.
You be careful too, Jumpy.
Yeah, got it. Take care. Junpei looked after her for a moment as she ran up the stairs, then took off for the hallway. Tragedy always strikes when one least expects it, but to wait for a man to stand before striking him down seems almost crueler than dealing the fatal blow while he lies on the ground. A light in a dark place, June's smile had given him hope, both for escape and maybe for something else. It was that hope that raised his spirits just enough that they might soon be fully dashed. A woman sat slouched against the wall. Lotus. Junpei felt his blood turn to ice. Her body was limp, her skin smooth and pale as always. By the way, blood warning. And it was covered in blood. Junpei felt his chest constrict. He couldn't breathe. His legs shook. A slow, cold drop of sweat trickled down his back. He felt his stomach somersault. Junpei's mind went blank, and all his thoughts replaced with endless hissing white. Driven by little more than instinct, he walked toward Lotus slowly. Each movement of his stiff limbs brought him closer to her corpse. Robotically, he bent down, put his hand against her neck. No pulse, no rise and fall or breathing. She was warm. But in Junpei's shaken mind, he'd recognized she'd only been recently killed. Yes, she'd been killed. Someone had killed her. A deep cut on the left side of her chest, blood still oozing from it, though clearly her heart had stopped beating some time ago. The weapon had been a knife then. Some type of blade. She'd been stabbed in the heart once. That had to have been her death. He took little comfort from knowing she must have suffered little. Only then did Junpei notice. Her bracelet was gone. Was that why the killer had ended Lotus's life? So they could have her number 8 bracelet? The killer would have wanted the number 8 then, or, more accurately, it would be the person who'd gained the most by obtaining bracelet 8. But who? The thought had only just entered Junpei's mind when he'd heard a noise, like a sharp knife cutting through wet meat. It struck him as strange that the noise came from inside his own body. A moment later, the pain hit him. It wasn't merely pain, too. There was heat. He felt as though molten iron had been splashed against the side of his body. His brain had made the connection. He'd been stabbed. But where? He was quickly going numb. He couldn't tell where the knife had met flesh. Given the circumstances, he'd been stabbed in the back. Whoever had killed Lotus had done the same to Junpei. His voice, little more than a weak groan. With what little strength he had left, Junpei turned his body, trying to catch a glimpse of his attacker. But the knife dug deeper, twisted violently. He collapsed to the floor, a puppet with its strings cut. His arms and legs lay where they fell, oddly twisted, awkwardly positioned. Junpei's body turned numb. He could feel the blood leaking out of him, but nothing would move. Nothing save for his eyes. And as he lay on the floor, his life ebbing away, Junpei saw his attacker. 2 tiny images of the killer reflected in his eyes. With that recognition came nothing. He felt no emotions, no anger, no sadness, no regret. The paralysis that had claimed his body had reached his mind. His killer glanced down at the body. And without a word, they climbed into the elevator and disappeared. His eyesight faded, the world grew blurry, and began to dissolve into an empty, white fog. It crept into the edges of his mind, and worked inexorably inward. Soon it swallowed the last of what remained at Junpei's mind, and his consciousness left him. Nothing more. Into utter emptiness he fell. Into zero. whatever Junpei had been was gone. Yeah, the bracelets still work, even if the person has perished. We've established this even in Clover's axe ending. She specifically killed Junpei in that ending just so she could escape, and she also had the 9 bracelet. All we know is that the 9 bracelet is going to be very important, specifically because it's going to let someone escape. But with that, we've gotten our third of 6 endings. And this one is a mandatory one, because it has information that's going to be important later. The knife ending. And with that, we can get to our 4th door. So we can get to our other 3 endings through the other door. Showing this game to people who haven't experienced it is always has its sort of fun, because you might know all the twists, I might know all the twists, but it's still nice seeing other people think, you know? Maybe I'm weird like that. I actually know I'm weird like that. I like seeing how people think. And it's kind of that reason why I went into the field of psychology in the first place. Yeah, they did. Specifically, that was originally introduced within the second game, which was on 3DS. Virtue's Last Reward. In that game, you could gain access to a timeline and do a whole bunch of jumping around at any point in time, provided you got a ending. In this one, you have to get a specific ending in order to be able to gain access to that. It's a bit crippling in that respect. If I remember correctly, the Notary games also adds a whole bunch of extra story beats, too, that weren't in the original game. Such, I am working in the background with Oxanon, specifically so I can show the last ending through her copy of the Nonary games. Or at least I want to work with Oxanon for that. So I'll probably reach out to her once I get the 5th ending, just to help set that up. Oxanon, the Boxanon. Yeah, exactly. I never remember these fucking codes. Oh, right. So, I think I know what I want to do for the next variety stream. I want to play Gunfire. I've been, playing through it yesterday, and I really like it. I understand why people really like it. It is super fun, yeah. Like, I've always heard the comparisons that were drawn between Gunfire and Borderlands. I can see that, and really, really easily. I do find it's a bit weird that I don't have a melee attack, because I'm a little too used to going shoot, shoot, punch, shoot, shoot, punch, if that makes sense, but hey. There's quite a bit of gun variety. They're all really... the ones that I've used so far are really, really interesting. I just wish I was better at the first boss, honestly. Like, I am getting better at fighting it, but at the same rate, I keep running into a whole bunch of issues where it's like, I dash to the side when it throws its rock thing, and I still get hit. I'm not sure if it's like a timing thing, or otherwise if I could like interrupt the attack. I can't figure that out. Pretty much my approach for that thing is make sure I get a whole bunch of power-ups, specifically so I can energy orbit, and then power up next shot so it does stupid damage, and just gun it down before it can use the rock attack too many times. I feel like it's behaviorally the wrong approach, but it's been working, and unfortunately I've been reinforced by that. I think so far, out of like 7 or 8 runs... No, I think it was like 6 or 7 runs, actually. Furthest I've gotten is to the second boss. And I almost killed it, too. But I got unlucky and tail swiped at a bad time and perished. I also don't know if there are, like, vaults within the second area, either. I feel like there are, but I don't know how to access them. I'll figure it out. It might be something I just need to, like, unlock. Though I think one of the bigger... I think another gripe that I'm starting to have with it, though, the sniper weapons. There's no true high-power sniper, and that feels weird to me. I've gotten at least a few different guns with scopes and whatnot, and they've been usually shooty-shooty, bang-bang, rapid-fire type things. Sure, they are decent at sniping, but they don't deal much damage, and that feels weird. I do like using the woodpecker, for example, just... it doesn't have the damage, and that bothers me. I mean, granted, with a name like the woodpecker, of course it would be rapid-fire, shooty-shooty, bang-bang, but... even still, you know? Like, giving all your items to someone else. I understand that. Just make someone super OP and watch on the sidelines. It does work? Really? Just a warning, you might not be able to do that with me, because, again, I have a tendency to get hit a lot, so, it might be in the best interest to, like, spread everything out. You can try it if you want, but I'm probably gonna die if you end up joining me. It doesn't matter which pair here, by the way, it just changes 2 pieces of artwork and that's it. Everyone has a reaction. Yeah, like, with Gunfire, at this point, I really want to unlock other characters, because, don't get me wrong, I like the MC, but I want to try some of the other characters too, now that I can actually gain access to them. The problem is just getting enough currency to buy them up. Which is going to mean a lot of playthroughs, or successful playthroughs at least. But I also want to get a whole bunch of power-ups and unlockables, because they're going to be important to make runs easier, and you kind of get into a catch-22 of you gotta pick and choose. Alright, finally at the door. Finally, we're going into door 4. Why'd Junpei even consider doing otherwise? He'd be there for June, for Akane. That seemed good. He felt it was the right choice to make. He made no shows of affection, but Junpei saw her as something more than just a friend from his childhood. He watched the other 4 walk to the door. Ace, Snake, Clover, 7. Junpei said nothing as they left. Before long, they'd reached door 5. They talked to one another for a few seconds, saying things Junpei couldn't hear, then laid their hands one by one on the scanner panel. Ace grabbed the lever, his face tight with determination. He turned over his shoulder to look at Junpei. Goodbye. Be careful. As Ace pulled the lever, the door swung open, the mouth of a great, hungry beast. Beyond the door, Junpei knew the sad remains of the 9th man would be there. It didn't surprise him that Ace, Clover, and 7 hesitated. The body wasn't a pleasant thing to look at. Snake had no such problems. His blindness made him immune to the horror. He stepped through the door, his feet making a wet splack in the blood. Do you intend to kill me? I assume you haven't forgotten the door only remains open for 9 seconds, have you? Snake hadn't even bothered to turn around, but the other 3 steeled themselves, stepped through. Door 5 swung shut, closing with the heavy finality of metal on metal. Junpei's companions scrambled to the door. They pressed their ears to it in an attempt to hear what might be taking place. It's beeping. It's just like before. Probably the sound of the detonator on the bracelet.
You think they're okay?
June's face showed her concern more plainly than words could. Almost as though in response to her question, a voice rang out from the other side of the door. 7's.
Hey, there it is. It's gotta be the 3rd thing. June, get over here. We gotta authenticate.
The beeping stopped. Sighs of relief were audible even through the doorway.
Looks like it stopped.
Junpei and his companions leaned away from the door, breathed a sigh of relief. You doing all right over there? They'd heard Seven's voice, but it wouldn't hurt to be sure.
Yeah,
Despite the recent danger, Clover's voice was as bubbly as ever.
I'm gonna tell you about this whole dead thing, okay? The dead is just like the red, but the color's different. You know how the red was red? The dead is blue. Other than that, it's the same. Authenticating is the same too.
Oh, good. Thanks. That helps a lot. We should probably move.
You should probably move. You be careful over there.
Roger. Junpei and the others left door 5, headed toward door 4. They stood in front of the red and placed each of their hands on it. Four asterisks. Junpei grabbed the lever, turned. You ready?
Let's go.
None of them looked optimistic, but their faces were set. Junpei nodded, turned toward the red. Let's go. With strength and determination, he pulled the lever. Run! The four then leapt through,